Bonjour, hello, and welcome to the Rosbiff Rugby podcast, your one-stop shop for all things French rugby, the top 14 Pro Day, bit of National, the French national team, and the Champions Challenge Cups. Most importantly of all, the brilliant towns, cities, bars, restaurants, stadiums, everything that makes French rugby so bloody fantastic. We're joined, as ever, by Rob Graham. Rob, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Not to be confused with the rugby pod, Rob Graham. I'm still the second most famous Rob Graham in rugby podcasting, which is
quite an honour.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it shows we've got a long way to go.
And perhaps more importantly, we're joined by AFP journalist, author of the fantastic Jouet, the French Rugby Dispatch, an aficionado of all things French rugby, Illtud Dafydd. Illtud, thanks for coming back on the pod. We didn't scare you away 18 months ago, whenever it was.
No, not at all. Any France-Wales or Wales-France week, and I always enjoy it. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. So first of all, we might as well start. It feels like an age ago, Thursday night. Amazing starter, regardless of however you feel about the Thursday night niche kickoff. Illtud, how was it in the ground? Did it live up to sort of expectations? How was your night?
Yeah, the build-up was as normal, really. Going to the game, like there was bottlenecks around the Stade de France, getting from where I parked my bike, getting to the media entrance. And once you're in, it was all normal, really. You had the 2-hour build-up to the game, which was quite cool. Music blaring, DJs going. Antoine Dupont finally back, and the crowd went crazy for that. And yeah, it was quite cool. Everything was quite normal, really. It was all great atmosphere. Fireworks went off, the lights went down, the anthems were sung pretty nicely. Nice to hear the Marseillaise as usual. And yeah, generally thought France just blitzed it, really. They did what they had to do in the first 40. Ireland's one game plan of box kicking didn't work. Atisogbe Penno, Ramos dealt with it quite cleanly, and then they're so clinical in the backs. Oliver should have scored. He butchered after some good work from Bielbiarre, if I can remember correctly. And yeah, they were just so clinical, finishing everything off. And for me, Michael Gaillard got man of the match, but I would have given it to Nicolas Deportel just because that was his real match where he's got nine test caps. Let me just check. Yeah, that was his 8th test cap, and he finally stood out. He laid his marker to say, "This is my 13 shirt now. Sorry, Gael Fickou, this is mine." And he's shown what he's done that for Bordeaux-Bègles in the past, and it was good to see him finally do that for France.
Yeah, it was. We felt with Deporter, kind of there were glimmers in the autumn, certainly from just a pure kind of abrasiveness, physicality to go with the silky running. But he was fantastic. How was obviously?
Can we, before you mentioned him there, we are very lucky to have Illtud this evening. We are the backup option though. What were your original plans this evening? If you could tell our listeners, the sort of podcast we're mixing with.
We have to ask the listeners to swear them to secrecy, but I was meant to be on a podcast with Gael Fickou, but sadly had to be cancelled because of French train problems from a presenter. So unfortunately, I couldn't do that. But fortunately, I could come and chat to my favourite French radio podcast.
I've got so many questions about what that chat was going to be like. Not that we were Rich and I would have been able to understand too much of it with our dodgy French translations.
No, but yeah, because Fickou started this podcast called Rugby Confidentiel, or I don't know, and it's with him, a presenter, and he's always got one guest a week, and it's really high-end stuff. I think it's they've got the same backers as The Good, the Bad, the Rugby with Pay No Tins and Hask back in London, and so they're a serious outfit going for it. They've only been going for a couple of months now, so it's going quite well. And I was looking forward to go on it just to see what it was like and how Gael Fickou was reacting. He spoke last week about being dropped. He said, "I expected it." He'd spoken to Galthié, which is quite nice to hear that Galthié is quite human and speaks to people. And yeah, it would have been really cool to go and have a look, but hey, that's life. Things go on.
Well, that sounds like two peas in the pod with our podcast, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Although, so Gael Fickou does not agree with Fred Quercy. He doesn't think that Fabien Galthié is the biggest shit on a human level.
No, I was on the bench for my first on Sunday, and I sat next to a guy who played in that Montpellier academy with Gael Fickou under Fabien Galthié, and he repeated the same sort of stuff. So, if there's two people saying it, it's probably true.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Anyway, Rich, you were about to talk about Nicolas Deporter.
Oh, I think I was mumbling on about it. I think all the kind of pre-selection and things has obviously been talked about for quite a while. The droppings of some of the big names, one of whom you were you were going to see tonight before you ended up here. How I think is like. Well, yeah, we're very much like we've been banging the Jalibert drum as everyone has because he's been so fabulous for Bordeaux for a period of time. Did it, in the ground and from a perhaps slightly more learned point of view, did it feel like France were clicking in the way that it looked on telly in the corner of a very wet pub in South London? Because it just felt like there was far more intent, far more pace, far more ambition, and I don't know if that's a bit of confirmation bias with the result, or did it feel that way to yourself?
Yeah, most of the narrative and chat pre-game in France definitely was how Dupont would go with Jalibert together because they've tried it so many times, but it hasn't really clicked, and it finally did click on Thursday night. But also, there's an element of that where Ireland weren't really that great, were they? A lot of Irish fans won't like it coming from a Welsh fan, but we're Welshmen. But that first half, they didn't pack a punch attackingly and defensively. They just got steamrolled. France have got such a triple threat attack where they can bully you up front, they can go out wide, and they can even kick behind you and chase. And France tried it all, and almost all of it worked. And Jalibert is smooth, and when he's playing with a pack that's dominating, then he has a lot of fun. There's a saying in French called "in a fauteuil," which means in an armchair. And he did get an armchair right, didn't he? He could have a bit of fun. And then when you've got Thomas Ramos, who's almost like a second 10, Patrick Alat, as the attack coach said this week in Midi Olympique, that the plan is to have almost two 10s in open play. And well, you can't really ask for two better 10s in attack, can you?
I think the way they worked together was really encouraging for France. I thought it was really cool the way that they almost alternated, kind of sitting in the backfield and launching counters or stepping in at 10. And I think you did see the benefit. A lot is made of the Dupont-Ntamack relationship, but I've always kind of said that I think there's also that same instinctive telepathy between Dupont and Ramos. And we definitely saw that a few times where Ramos just steps in, calls for it, sees it's on, and it's almost like Dupont will run the show until he hears kind of a shout from Thomas Ramos, and then he'll fling it out of the back. But I think the fact that Jalibert kind of also kind of had that kind of element and fun to his game, and they stepped in. And I think when you saw him go for it ball in hand, you're right, Rich, there was a real intent to run. And I think I watched it back today as well, and I think I was more impressed with Jalibert's performance watching it back than I was even at the time. I thought some of his kicking is absolutely fantastic, and yeah, his running is amazing, and he so nearly sparks some wonderful things. But some of his kicking out of hand was superb, and the selection of when they kicked and when they ran, I thought was brilliant. I thought it was really encouraging the way that they kind of. It's almost like the Dupont, the Jalibert and Ramos relationship is almost as much of a thing as the Dupont and Jalibert relationship.
Neilton, I know it's going back a few months now, but obviously there was the big kind of disappointment of the second half collapse against South Africa, but save a few lovely counter-attacks, it wasn't the most convincing of autumns all told for France. And actually the gap between this performance and where they finished it seems, at least on the surface, like a chalk and cheese, really. What was the reaction to we obviously get the bits we can translate and maybe a bit of an anglicised point of view, but what was the reaction to where France are at after that autumn and therefore kind of coming into this? Those selections again were the headline, but what was the kind of the expectation, the feeling? Is there any pressure you think on any of the stalwarts and Galthié? How did it feel on like your side of the channel?
there's massive disappointment for that South Africa game because it was being built up as being like the revenge for the World Cup quarter final. And the autumn just like flattened and petered out. Like they just about beat Fiji. Australia were not a good team by the end of the year, and France just about managed to beat them. So there was pressure definitely, and for the first time since I've covered Galthié since he took over in December 2019, and it was the first time I saw a big two-page spread in the keep really pointing fingers at him, and it wasn't just him as an individual, but almost across the board, his the way he communicates with the press, the game plan, the team selection. Like, it was quite funny to see that there wasn't a single journalist giving his byline on the piece. It was just the rugby writers of L'Equipe was on the piece, because obviously I think they were scared they would tread on getting some hot water with that. And so there was pressure on Galthié. Like, Galthié will not get sacked because of what he's done off the field with governance and how he's organised between the federation and then the top 14 and the pro clubs, and how he's now managed to get a 42-man squad training at Macclesfield every week, when in the past it was barely 30. The relationship between the clubs and the National Federation are at the best as possible, and Galthié has been a big part of that, because he just has been. Laporte was part of it, and now Florian Gill has taken over as well, and there's no threat he's not going to get sacked. But there was pressure because I think the fans and the press realise how talented this generation of players are, and how talented Antoine Dupont is, and how much of a shame it would be to see him not win a World Cup. We can think of all great Six Nations win a Grand Slam, fantastic, but the holy grail is the World Cup. And if Antoine Dupont doesn't win a World Cup, then something's gone wrong somewhere. And that's why we're all leading up to next.
I think Galthié, on the whole, like, we've been fairly critical, Rich, of perhaps some of the team selections. We've definitely wanted more, and I think I've laid quite a lot of the blame at Patrick Arletas, because you've got these brilliant attacking talents, and they're left to kind of do it themselves. Like, all the good stuff in the autumn was just and realistically in the summer tour as well, was just individual skill. Yeah. But I think you've got to give credit. Like, it felt like they got the selections spot on in this game. I think when you look at the ploy to go with the two back rowers, or two guys capable of playing back row in the second row, and that their ball carrying is what Ireland kind of couldn't really. That's what pinned Ireland back, was just the relentless. You had 5 ball carriers in that back row, or maybe 5 if you include Marchand and take, someone like Cross didn't carry that much, but just the relentlessness of those carries meant that Ireland were kind of always on the back foot. I do think Ireland played into France's hands with. Basically, they had one ploy that it was almost like they'd heard that they were dodgy under the high ball, and they were like, right, we're going to try that. But they could have. You only saw for 15, 20 minutes in the second half Ireland play their own game plan that wasn't just kicking, and even then, when they had those sustained periods of pressure, it was still a lot of kicking. But once they kind of carried around the fringes and got their maul game going and stuff like that, they looked like Ireland. But for outside of that 15, 20-minute period, they didn't look like Ireland at all. And I think they kind of, I think they played into France's hands. It's hard to know in these scenarios whether it's, Ireland bad or France good. I think France kind of put Ireland on the back foot, and Ireland kind of never really fired a shot until 60-minute mark, basically.
Illtud, just to pick you up on the point you were making before, I know it's often been kind of like melodramas between coaches and the top 14 sides, but personally, I wasn't particularly aware of Galthié's role in that kind of governance piece and just what he's done for the international side through that. Like, what are you able just to quickly cover kind of where that was at? His sort of intentions, plan, where it's got to, because it's nothing that I've ever really heard or seen too much about, and I'm fascinated by what he's been doing behind the scenes.
Right, here's French through politics in 60 seconds. But no, so the basic thing was that Galthié, before becoming the French head coach, he coached him at Paris, he coached at Toulon, but more importantly, he was the TV pundit for France home games, which meant that he saw what every other country was doing as part of his research of being a pundit. Was he saw what Ireland were doing, he saw what South Africa were doing, what was working, what wasn't working, and he realised that they had more time. Those head coaches of other national teams had more time with their players than Philippe Saint-André, Guy Novès, Jacques Brunel did. And also, they had more players to train with. So originally, they had about a 30-man squad, or maybe 31, 33, like you'd have in a World Cup squad, and then they would be together just in the week leading up to games. When in Ireland or Wales, as an example, they get that extra week before Six Nations, and even in that fallow week they stay in camp. When in the past it wasn't. They would go back to the top 14 clubs and they would play a full-blown game 9 p.m. on a Sunday live on Canal Plus, and they'd be back into Marcoussis with a French squad on Monday, but they wouldn't be able to train then until Wednesday because they had to recover. Well, now what Galthié asked was, no, I want my he has a wider 42-man squad, and then depending on when the game's played and which week it is, then sometimes he releases 14 of those players back to their clubs to play, and he keeps 28 with him at Marcoussis. And those 28 are normally the 23 that are going to be play the game, and 5 travelling reserves. When they cover last weekend, it was, off the top of my head, Thibaut de Bagna was on there, a couple of props, Maxime Lamotte, and there was some of there. So the players where you need cover just in case there's an injury during the week, etc. And that's what he's got, really. He got that during the build-up to the World Cup. There was a bit of tension after the quarter-final loss because the top 14 were like, well, we've done all this for you and we haven't got the World Cup, so what more do you want? Since then, there's been a new agreement where there are a few more changes regarding player release. That's why we won't see France's first choice players playing against New Zealand next summer, because it's only a week after the top 14 final, so any Toulouse players won't be there. But ideally...
Well, haven't they said that they will release? It's just everyone's assumed that final will be Toulouse v Bordeaux, and therefore you're not going to have half the first team. Yeah. But if, for example, and it has happened in the past, like if Toulouse slip up in a semi-final,
and
you could have Antoine Dupont available for that New Zealand tour, right? Because I think the clubs have said that they'll release them.
If it's Castres against Stade Francais, then Galthier's thumbs up.
Let's hope so.
You know? And the All Blacks are probably annoyed because the new coach will have to start against like a proper team. But no, and that's what he's done. He's calmed things down. It's not just him, a lot of work, and also what he's done, which is quite cool, which a lot of other coaches do, which he goes to these clubs now. He goes to watch Bayonne train. He takes his forwards coach, he takes Arletas with him. They go for a couple of days to see Bayonne train. It helps him because he can have a look at or is it Boyne Alexandre Fischer or Jean Segond? Then when it goes to Perpignan, he can have a catch up with Pozzolo Tulagi to see how he's going, have a chat with Laurent Beat to say how's he tracking. All this different stuff, like it makes him far more. There's much more communication between the clubs and the national team and the national coach, so everything is a bit more rosy. Now they just need the results to come.
I did notice on the when they do the 28-man squad, the tweet or the official, maybe it was the official press release, says in agreement, as part of the agreement between the LNR and the FFR, these players have been released, which I kind of thought, like, don't know, I found that quite curious that they've like spelled it out, which kind of highlights how I guess the history of it and getting to that position was a bit of a struggle.
I also think that it's a big like communication drive for them. If both entities have the names on that press release, it shows they work together. You know, it paints them both in good light, and it makes them both. Because without the clubs, you don't have the national team. But without the national team, you don't have the clubs. They both have to work together for the whole sport in general to flourish and to evolve. And I think they've realised that. And Jan Robert, who's the president of the top 14 now, he's relatively young for a president of the LNR. In the past, they've been voluntary roles. Now he's going to get paid to do it. He was at Lyon, 2 years ago, if that. And he's really energetic. He's really keen to meet journalists. He's had lunches with, like, off the record lunches with different journalists over the past 6 months just to see like what they think could be improved, etc. So yeah, he's things are going in the right direction.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think there's always, I don't know, there's such a, Galthié seems to have such an air to him, being that kind of, I don't know, that sort of PR exec manager across the clubs doesn't necessarily, well, certainly to me, doesn't necessarily scream his most obvious trait. So, yeah, it's very, very cool to hear. Rob, is there anything else you wanted to discuss re Ireland, or should we wind it ahead to?
Yeah, I've got beef, haven't I? I've got beef with the other Rob Graham and the Rugby Pod, who they damn bigger. I'm calling him out. Like they said Mikel Guillard was a luxury player. They compared him to Chandler Cunningham South, who I think is the near definition of a luxury player. And I don't know. I was just quite. I think like the biggest rugby pod in the world should be better. They've got to do better. Rather than just dialing it in. I think, anyone that's seen Mikel Guillard play knows that he's just an absolute workhorse. And yeah, I also like it's just the element of shock that they had about like Aldrit and Fickou and Penno not being available. I think like I don't know. I think these big podcasts that they think they know French rugby, and we don't know French rugby, but I think we know it better than some of them because we follow it. But yeah. Would you say that like the people understood why those guys got dropped and why the guys were coming through? Because I like we were completely on board with it. Really, I'd say, Rich. Like, is the French public like, oh my god, Aldrit's been dropped? I can't believe that. Or are they like, well, yeah, he's been crap for a couple of years. So
there's an element of like French being relaxed about everything. Like, yeah, we don't not they don't care, but there's like, well, like the Gallic shrug is. That's life, isn't it? But there's like an element of also like realizing, well, if you actually look at it, if you actually think of Aldrit's had problems. He took a couple of months away from rugby because he couldn't handle it after the World Cup because mentally he wasn't in the right state. And since then, he hasn't been superb either with La Rochelle. He will get back to his best, I'm sure, because when he is on his day, he is the best in British France. There's no doubt about that. Gael Fickou, you can look at his age profile. You can see that he's out a bit. He's not in great form for France. Racing aren't doing great. They're not the most exciting backline, despite having really good players on paper. It's not really clicking, and the colours are definitely in the back. Yeah, exactly. And then Penno, well, if you look at the week before, the 2 weeks before, he gave away 2 tries. Like he passed the ball before scoring. Like if Galthié's seeing that, he's like, well, if the record try scorer of my country doesn't want to score tries for his club. Obviously. And then when you look at the options they've changed them with, Atisogbe is the most consistent winger. Defensively, he's sound and he really makes a mistake. Deporter, well, we've spoken about it. And the back row, the back 5 rejig worked, didn't it? So, okay, I'm still not convinced by Jalanche as a test number 8, but the balance was there. It was all right.
Test back row, he's clear. Like, he was banging people. Like whether he's actually number 8, and they kind of got away with it because of the balance with Olivon and Guillard, and then kind of Miafu, I guess, in the second half. Like the ball carrying came from other guys, so it's the overall balance, isn't it? It's like France are a lot less numbers on jerseys than kind of other nations in the Six Nations.
It's almost the basic. It's a funny thing. Like in French, you don't have open sides and blind sides. You have right and left. So that changes the way you attack and defend. So like. And even you could even argue like now second rows they're not just second rows. Even Thibaut Flamand when he plays, he can cover 6 if he wants to. And he's quite a flamboyant second row. Cameron Wackey can play from 4 to 8. They've got options and they're just really versatile.
Just on one of those, you mentioned giving the ball away for tries, and on one of those back rows, we were denied by the slightest but very clear knock on. We were denied, Richard, possibly the best own try of the season. I think it would have been nailed on when Lenny Nucci just passed the ball to Ronan Kelleher 1 metre from his own line. That would have been a spectacular own try. That was the
Nucci's been a favourite for a while, but that secured it, or came very close to securing it. It was
also just after he'd like monstered Jack Conan as well.
Yeah, he was fantastic defensively, wasn't
it? Going on to that, from what have you been at Marcoussis today?
No. So France players arrived Monday night.
Okay.
They trained first on Tuesday. They were given 4 days off over the weekend because the training schedule has got much tighter. The sessions are lasting less time, but they're a bit more intense, and they decided to give them 4 days off pretty much. So they were off from Friday until Monday night.
Oh,
And they'll be back in Tuesday, Wednesday to fully train. I think they're training as well on Thursday. But there's already talking. Because Flamand's come back in, Boudin's come in, Gourges out. So there's definitely selection calls to be made.
That was where I was going with it, because the rumours that I've seen is that, well, Flamand comes back in, which is kind of understandable. Guillard retains his shirt, although I saw in one place it was Guillard / Mearfu, and you kind of, Olivon's gone, Boudin comes in for Jegu, and you've kind of got a bit of a reshuffle. So all these guys that played really well, like Olivon, Jegu had a pretty good game. Guillard was obviously man of the match. There's a chance that he might not start. It's feels a bit strange. And I think the selection that they picked for Ireland might not work against every team. I think they might need a bit more Maul time. So they might need Flamand and Mearfu against Scotland and England. But to kind of switch that around feels a bit so soon, feels a bit strange. I do think he's injured. He's injured his ankle, hasn't he? But I think Calvin Gorge was probably the one player for me that came out, him and maybe the Toy Rex, Dorian Aldegheri. But I think Calvin Gorge did not have a good game. Like he fell off a few tackles. He didn't look that great in attack. He kind of chewed up some space down the right for Atis Ogbe. I think, after everyone's singing his praises, but I think.
Rob, we know your intentions to get Fabien Brau-Boirie in this side of incredibly,
it's happening,
incredibly opaque.
I can't wait for a whole week of talking about Fabien Brau-Boirie. People will be like, "Who's this? Timo, Timu, kind of Louis BLBRA." It's like, no, this guy's the real deal. But really, so you haven't heard any kind of anything yourself on kind of what the makeup of the team will be? I guess if they're only just coming back in now, they won't be releasing who's being let go for the weekend until what, Thursday?
Yeah, Thursday night. Thursday night. No, but I was on the RMC podcast, which is RMC is kind of like almost like a 5 Live sort of thing. They do sports and news, but it's it's privately owned, so it's a bit different like that. And I was speaking to some of the guys there today, and they were saying, okay, the thing is, Flamand has to come back in because he's Thibaut Flamand. He's so consistent, and he's been like part of that of Galthié setup since his debut 6 years ago now. And Boudin could come in as well, because when he has played in France, he's never let Galthié down. But at the same time, it doesn't matter, because if you bring both of them back into the 23, Olivon will just replace Orado on the bench, and Jegu will probably pip it for Nucci just because he's more of a line-out option. But at the same time, there's also the argument with Denis Charvet, who's the former France international three-quarter, who was saying, don't change stuff just for the reason, just to change stuff. Like, maybe keep consistency, leave combinations together for them to have minutes together on the pitch. And then also, like, this hurts me a lot to say, but it's just Wales, really. Like, they can almost put out like a second team and still get a 50-point win, essentially. So, like, does it matter if you change? It's almost... Galthié can change and make his selection choices totally in his team, for his team. He almost doesn't have to worry about the opposition because they probably will win easily. So the ball is in his court, really. I'm sorry, Wales, but I'm sorry, the land of my parents, my brother, my sister, everyone. I'm sorry, but really, realistically, that's what it is, really.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have to ask you. You mentioned politics earlier. I'm not asking for the full sort of psychodrama and the pretty sort of sad, frankly, whatever's been going on over in Wales. But for this squad right now, I assume you watched the England game at the weekend. It was so insipid, and it just felt off the whole occasion. Can you see that Wales team being able to muster anything this weekend? Do you think they are just in such a difficult place, or do you think there is is there a glimmer anywhere? And I appreciate that probably sounds like a slightly patronising question to Welsh fans, but yeah, I can't. I was just baffled by what I saw at the weekend.
It's heartbreaking. I have so much sympathy for the players, and especially Steve Tandy and those who are associated with the Ospreys, because what they're going through is incredibly difficult. Some of them have signed contracts thinking they're going to still play for this team for the next years to come, and they probably won't be. Some of those players have dreamt of playing for that team for the rest of their careers, but they won't be able to. And it definitely plays on this because it overshadows everything they care about in their whole lives, you know. So it is very difficult. But then when you look on paper, it's not the fault of the players that are there. It's not the fault of even Steve Tandy who selects them. It's not the fault of the guys running the union now. It's the fault that what happened 10, 15 years ago when Ron Gatlin was in charge, and you had this prioritisation over Team Wales, and everything else was forgotten. And well, during that period, we had a golden generation of fantastic players, almost 2 test quality players in every position. And because we forgot about, actually, let's keep bringing these players through, this is what we've got. We've got some incredible individuals still. Like, there are exciting players who I would happily have paid a ticket to go and watch, like Lewis Ruzamit. Second half looked really well. Dan Edwards, he reminds me of Errol Thomas. I just think he has that little bit of spark that he can really get a backline going. Thomas Williams is exciting. Harry Deeves off the bench was superb. So there are glimmers of hope, definitely, but collectively, it's going to take time for us to catch up, and there is a lot of catching up to do.
The glimmer, Rich, of course, is that you just don't know which France team's going to turn up. You don't know whether they'll turn up on the day. So there's the glimmer of hope for Wales. I think the weird thing that for me is like you mentioned a load of backs there, but like Nicky Smith is the best scrummaging loosehead in the Prem, like factually almost. Dowie Lake's a fantastic player. You've got Dafydd Jenkins, who's captain at a really good Exeter team. Adam Beard is going into our areas of relative expertise. Like, he's had a fantastic season at Montpellier. And I did notice, this is a really random and useless fact. There's, of the 8 forwards, and if you include the scrum half, there were 9 clubs represented by the Welsh 1 to 9, which I don't know whether that plays into it. Like, literally no like club combinations there, whether that was kind of why it didn't work. But I think that's probably shoehorning a narrative in there, because those guys are really talented players, and I think there's more in there. They can definitely do better than they did at the weekend. So,
well, it's a far cry from 2008 when there was 13 Ospreys in the starting lineup, and Wales won and who took them. You know, and you're right. Like, combinations are key, and to get people to gel quickly, you kind of almost need them to know each other quite well. Like someone like Adam Beard hasn't really been involved much at the test level. Thomas Francis has come back in from the cold since at Provence. Dave Jenkins has been injured for a while. So there is like a question of like definitely gelling and getting to know each other and getting to know Steve Tandy, getting to know the setup, and also everything, the off-field context as well. As always, it was difficult. I can imagine for Adam Beard, a former Osprey who's in France, who's a bit far away from stuff, coming back into the Goldfish Bowl and hearing all these stories about his mates or guys he knows really well. Like, he played under Steve Tandy at the Ospreys. He played under Steve Tandy at Lions. Like, he knows that there were close relationships within that squad, and it's not an easy time, definitely.
Rob, anything else on the Six Nations looking ahead? I think there's maybe a little bit of squad change on the horizon, but otherwise, there's like some murmurings on the fitness of Yoram Moefana on there as well. So there's a very real possibility that Fabien Brau-Boirie makes his debut this weekend, whether it's off the bench or as a starter. You know, the specialist inside centre getting that role. It's like when this time last year, it was actually the Wales game when Atis Ogbe was about to make his Six Nations debut. It's kind of like, can't wait for the world to see the talent that this guy has and how good he is. Rob, if Deportaire goes down as well, we'll know you've had the voodoo doll out and you've been sending him off to the Pyrenees.
Brau-Boirie and Gaeton just from the start. Excellent.
All right, well, Illtud, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck with Jouet. We'll be keeping a keen eye out for that. Hope all goes well with Gael Fickou when you eventually get there. And yeah, massive thanks again for coming on the Rosbif Rugby podcast. It's been superb.
No, pleasure anytime.